Hello and welcome. You're here with us on Bloomberg Quint, and we're here to wrap the markets up for you. And Shraddha is, of course, going to tell us about what's happened. So tell us, Shraddha, we saw a good start, at least in the start of the day, and we eventually saw the markets fall in the last hour of trade. What went wrong?
That's correct, Agam. We started with gains of over 1% in the early trades, and by the end of our closing trades, we gave up almost half of the gains that we had seen. What went wrong? Well, you had the finance minister comments coming in post the review of PSU bank earnings. Three key things that he said, and I am going to talk about. He said that the public sector banks still face the challenge of high NPAs. He said the banks are facing challenges to find alternative investors and new buyers, and they're still working on it, which is a slight negative. And on the more important part on bank recapitalization, he said that the more the merrier, but the budget has its limitations. So no scope really for any higher allocation as far as the bank's capitalization budgetary support is concerned. So probably that's something that disappointed PSU banks, because PSU banks are the ones which are in dire need of capital. So the Nifty PSU bank index fell well above 2% after those comments came in. So that could be probably one reason why we saw that sharp fall in the Nifty.
But you know, something that stood out this week is that we saw some selling when it comes to the foreign institutional investors. Does this have anything to do with the upcoming events that are lined up next week?
Totally. So two important events that we do have next week. You have the FOMC, that is the Fed meeting, and the Bank of Japan meeting. Markets across Asia also through the week, if you talk about the week, have been trading within a tight band. Most of the Asian markets, of course, were shut today, but there's been a very tight band in which they have traded. Now remember, India was trading at a 18-month high just last week. So what has changed over that week? Well, we could probably see it could have been some profit booking on account of those two important events. Again, just to highlight the fact, after yesterday's weak data in US, now the odds of a Fed rate hike in the September policy, which is next week, have fallen to below 20%. Again, near-term Indian markets hence should swing in line with how other emerging markets really do in the next week in the backdrop of these two events. And the FI flows that you were talking about, the data which we have says $160 million were pulled out so far this week from India. So optically, it may not seem like a big number, but it remains the biggest weekly outflow in 5 months. So that really gains some significance. But again, it could be partially attributed to the fact that we have ICICI Prudential Life IPO that opens on Monday. Now it's one of the biggest IPOs in the last 4-5 years that we've seen. They're looking to raise about 6,000 crores via an OFS. So there is some belief that some of the foreign outflows could come back via the IPO route. And Agam, on the back of that, we've also seen some reaction as far as the rupee is concerned. I do want to talk about this because we're talking about emerging markets and global markets events that are coming up next week. So yesterday, the rupee ended below the 67 psychological mark, so it fell about 13 paise. The rupee today firmed up about 15 paise in early trades, given the positive gains that Indian markets were trading with. But for the week, the rupee is lost, or it is depreciated by 30 paise, and that's the biggest weekly fall or depreciation since Brexit. So a lot of the next week events will really determine how we really move for the next week. Agam, what are F&O trends suggesting?
So, the up move that we saw today, we hit about 88,850, and that really hasn't changed much when it comes to the range, of course. We're still hanging around between 86 or 8,500 on the lower side and 9,000 on the upside. Remember that we did see a lot of churn in the Nifty components, but let's also address what's happened in the options market today. So as expected, we were expecting a lot of activity in the 8,800 call and the puts, and that's where we are looking at that big spike out here of a significant amount of addition in the 8,800 call. But other than that, we've seen a little bit of an unwinding in the 9,000 put. Moving on to, again, the puts and the calls here, we are looking at maximum open interest in the 8,500 call, in the 8,500 put and the 9,000 call. So the range remains the same. Not much has changed. What could have changed a little is the open interest, and we will get the final details in a couple of hours. That's when we have the release of the power copy. But that's as far as the futures and options space is concerned. What about the big gainers and the losers, or at least as far as the benchmark goes?
When it comes to the Nifty, auto stocks are continuing to see traction. That's one sector which has really done well. That stood out today also. So you have names like Eicher Motor, you have Hero Motocorp, Maruti Suzuki, Bajaj Auto, all of these sitting with strong 1.5 to 2.5% kind of gains. You had something like TCS, which saw some rebound today. ITC was up 2.5%. This is a stock which is gained for the second straight session. On the losing end, you have Yes Bank that continues to reel under pressure. Remember, yesterday you had UBS coming out with the target price of 650, almost 50% downside sort of levels. Plus, you had the failed QIP impact. So that continues to face pressure. Metals stocks were trading weak today. So you saw Tata Steel, you have some of the names like Hindalco, all these were trading weak today. We also saw banks like ICICI Bank, Bank of Baroda. So the banking, some of the banking names were also weak. So that's as far as the benchmark is concerned. But Agam, mid-cap space, what were the broader trends?
Well, very quickly, let's take a look at what's happened in the mid-cap space, at least in the broader markets. We're looking at gains in JBF Industries, Prestige Estates, Wockhardt, as well as Thermax. We've seen good gains in some of the sugar companies as well. Of course, DCM Sugar figures in this, DCM Shriram figures in this list. Kitex Garment and Tidewater Oil are among some of the other gainers in today's day of trade. As far as the losers are concerned, we've seen about a 9% decline in Polaris. Jayaprakash Power continues to show weakness, down 8%, and UCO Bank as well, along with Gujarat Fluorochemicals, also losing out quite a bit in today's day of trade. So it's been yet another day where we've seen mixed moves when it comes to the mid-caps. Anything that we're keeping an eye on going to next week, Shraddha?
Global events, you have your Fed meet, and of course domestically ICICI IPO are just the two things. No major data points that we're looking at. So that's all as far as how the markets really did this week. But we will be back just in a bit with Rhythm Desai of Morgan Stanley on Thank God It's Friday. Do tune in about 5 odd minutes.